Hello, everyone. My name is Gail Sims. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Fellowship Selection Committee.
And I'm Patty Higgins. I'm also on the Fellowship Selection Committee. Thank you for joining us on this video. We would like to share tips for completing the application to become a Fellow of ARN. The Fellowship Selection Committee really wants everyone who applies to be successful and ready to fill out the application when it's time. It truly is a privilege to achieve the prestigious designation of FARN. It is the most distinguished level of membership, as well as a public hallmark of professional esteem. It is our hope that this video presentation will assist you in the application process.
First, we'd like to give you a brief history of the Fellow Designation Program. We started out in 2019. We had 22 applicants, 15 of whom were successful in being awarded the Fellow designation. At that time, applicants were required to have 2 sponsors. The next year, in 2020, we had 10 applicants. 7 were successful. We changed the requirements to 1 sponsor being required to be a fellow, and the second sponsor needed to be a non-fellow. Then in 2021, we had 3 applicants. All were successful. We continued to require that one of the sponsors needed to be a fellow. The second, a non-fellow. At the start of our 3rd year, the committee decided to create a rubric as a guide to help the applicant and sponsors to see if they were ready to apply before spending the time and money on the process. In 2022, we asked sponsors to get into a more active role in the process to help mentor applicants to be successful. We wanted fellows to serve as sponsors to give assistance as needed, along with support for people to objectively evaluate their experience in ARN. It was our hope that this could determine their readiness to submit their application. For example, when reviewing the application with the sponsor and using the rubric as a guide, it may have been determined that they needed to possibly do some more work before applying, which was fine. During 2022, there were 8 applicants and 6 were selected to receive the Fellow designation. In the fall of 2022, the Fellowship Selection Committee conducted a survey of 2 groups of ARN members. We sent out a survey to people who were looking at the application but had not submitted. We wanted to get a better idea of what barriers prevented them from submitting. We sent a second survey to fellows who had not sponsored anyone in 2020 or 2021 to discover why they had not sponsored anyone. Was there an opportunity that existed there? In the spring of 2023, the committee used the results of these 2 surveys to make changes in the application process. We also wanted to provide additional clarity regarding the role of sponsors. We then revised the video of tips for application completion to become a Fellow of ARN. We were confident that these improvements would have a positive effect on the application process and would lead to more fellows being effective sponsors. The improvements in the application template and the rubric modifications were expected to lead to more qualified candidates. We hope this revised video helps provide applicants and sponsors with guidance and support throughout the application process.
So now let's explore the application process with you. It can also be viewed on our ARN website. The Fellow application is an opportunity to really highlight or showcase your accomplishments. Finding a sponsor may seem challenging to some ARN members. Rest assured, there are many mentors who are qualified to support applicants. You will be strongly encouraged to review the entire application process with your chosen sponsors. Your chosen sponsors should be working with you along every step. Remember, one must be a fellow in good standing. The fellow will be able to provide needed guidance and support for a successful application process. And so now we're going to take a closer look at each section of the application. The first step is the introduction, where you express that you're interested in applying. Then we're going to look at the criteria for selection and review the list of requirements. In order to apply, you have to be an ARN member in good standing, having made outstanding contributions to ARN, a willingness to commit, along with being an ARN member for at least 5 years or more. If you feel that you can meet all of those requirements, hit the yes button to continue. If not, the next step is to have a conversation with your chosen sponsors to determine what to do in the coming year to qualify in the future. And okay, so now you decide you meet the application criteria. What's next? Let's look at the selection process. One of the first things you must look at is, what's the application deadline? And do I have a sufficient time to get ready for it this year? It must be fully completed before the deadline. An incomplete application will not be reviewed. The ARN office and the Fellowship Selection Committee will not notify applicants of an incomplete packet, and they will not be able to accept any revisions after the application deadline. So it's important to get it right the first time around. Let's go over the application requirements next. As mentioned earlier, the applicant needs to identify 2 sponsors, one of which must be a fellow. Your second sponsor can also be a fellow or a non-fellow ARN member. If you need to find out who the current fellows are, you can find this listed on our website. Once a fellow agrees to sponsor, a second sponsor needs to be identified. It is important to find sponsors who are familiar enough with your past involvement in ARN to vouch for you and attest to your history of chapter and national level of leadership participation. The next step in the application process is for you to provide a written statement of intent. It is important to describe why you are applying to become a fellow. The next step is to complete the letter of commitment. Submitting an up-to-date CV is very important. The final step is to submit the processing fee once all these pieces are in place. Your applicant information will provide your demographics and links to your chapter membership.
ARN involvement is the real foundation and the nuts and bolts of this process. Read the directions very carefully and review the application with both sponsors. It is always best to have more than one set of eyes on the application to ensure completion before submitting the document. This means that you should be very specific about what contributions you have made in your past, giving some examples and details, such as serving in a specific committee as a chairperson or member, the number of people involved, and type of tasks that were embarked upon is very helpful. Adding your efforts to recruit new members, mentoring in the chapter, and making that your consistent involvement over the 5 years is also very important. We recommend using the provided rubric for these areas of leadership involvement. The rubric is intended to help you with this, so remember to use it as your guide. Now, focusing on what you submitted in your CV, you can copy and paste your information into the application. Make sure everything matches between your CV and the application. More information can always be added at the bottom of this section to really expound on your experience. So let's look at the scoring rubric we've been talking about. We have 3 columns on the rubric to identify the degree and level of your involvement in activities, committee meetings, participation in presentations, recruitment, and any publications or other related activities. This is a very important section that really showcases your commitment to the profession of rehabilitation nursing. Your community involvement is a section that you can fill in that shows what things you've been doing outside of ARN. The rubric provides a handy guide to help you with this. Ensure that you capture all of this evidence of involvement in your CV. You can then use related portions to cut and paste into the fellowship application. Now let's look at the rubric for community involvement. It is very important to give examples here. There may be more than just this list alone that you've been involved in, but looking back on your history and ARN, what things really do apply as community involvement? The rubric should help answer this question. Again, make certain you mention all activities in your CV. Next, determine how you would rate your activity or involvement in each of these categories. Okay, now let's look at publications and research. Here, you can put more details about your contributions to ARN and rehabilitation on a global scale. There is an opportunity to add more information here as well. There is no separate rubric for this section. When we're looking at honors, awards, and recognitions, this is an opportunity to show others how you have been recognized and how you've made a tremendous impact as a rehabilitation nurse leader. We want you to paint a clear picture of yourself within the application so that reviewers can see how you have led by example. This is how the application should be filled out. Entering CV into the application itself is not allowed. Instead, we want you to list any highlighted activities in each of the application sections. More detailed information can be captured in your attached CV. You can cut and paste information from your CV to fill out each part of the application. We encourage you to cover every element that's asked for here, such as honors, awards, and recognitions conferred by ARN or other associations. These elements could be from your employment or from your community, as long as they're related to rehabilitation or nursing in general. You can see very clearly on the rubric for this section what constitutes the 3 levels regarding honors, awards, and recognitions. Make sure that you look closely at the definitions in each category. The rubric guides you in determining whether you may be granted the fellowship. If you're not ready to apply, the rubric can assist you in setting new goals with the help of your sponsors for next year. You want to make sure that you are rating yourself in the highest level possible. Some categories are time limited and some are not. In the case of honors, awards, and recognition, it's not time limited. Now we want to go over the quality of impact. This section is the heart of the application. Your CV and application paint a clear picture of all your accomplishments. This section will show the significance of these achievements and the true meaning behind your work as a rehabilitation nurse leader who is deserving of being awarded fellow status in ARN. Please do not simply repeat what is in your CV in this section. Instead, we want you to expound on it in your own narrative. Tell us why your efforts have mattered. How have you influenced positive change in the clinical arena? How have you contributed to the organization's growth? In what ways have you implemented ARN's strategic goals? How have your endeavors impacted the lives of your colleagues, patients, and family caregivers? How have you been involved in health policy in removing disparities, recognizing social determinants of health, and taken an active role in enhancing access to healthcare through research and evidence-informed practices? How has the world of rehabilitation nurses changed or evolved because of your efforts and energy? How has this impact been seen, and how have others been affected by your influence? What is the quality of your impact? Not just the quantity of contributions noted on the application. Describe these actionable outcomes or results of all the time and energy you have spent. We encourage you to share all contributions you've made in your career, particularly those that have significantly advanced rehabilitation and nursing overall. Use this opportunity to share the rich personal meaning about how you have made a difference through the work you have done. You are also given the opportunity to write a summary at the end of the application. It needs to be 500 words or less and contain what you consider to be the most outstanding contributions in the field of rehabilitation nursing. Here you describe the outcomes of activities and contributions, showing your influence or impact on the specialty practice of rehabilitation nursing and your involvement toward reaching the goals of ARN. These activities may be related to service, research, publication, presentations, education, administration, consultation, advocacy, and/or practice. There are no time requirements for this section. However, there should be a pattern of sustainability of activities over time. The next section asks for a statement of commitment from the applicant to agree to accept the responsibilities of the fellow status. By acknowledging that you agree and that you understand, you are confirming you will serve ARN as a fellow in mentoring others, sponsoring future potential candidates through their application process, and by continuing to participate in committees, acting as a role model, and volunteering to contribute toward the advancement of the specialty practice of rehabilitation nursing. If you do not believe that you will accept future requests for your involvement, you should reconsider whether you should submit your application. This is an opportunity for you to become even more involved with ARN as a leader. Lastly, you will be able to upload your CV.
Next, we want to say a few words to our sponsors. The application does require that there must be 2 sponsors. One must be a fellow and the other does not have to be a fellow. However, both sponsors can be fellows. There is a separate link on our webpage that sponsors will need to access. As indicated here, the page is Fellowship Designation, found under Membership, where you will find instructions for the fellowship sponsor to review and complete. The role of a sponsor is very important. Not only will a sponsor be asked directly to sponsor a fellow candidate, but they themselves are encouraged to seek out members who appear to be qualified and encourage them to apply. Sponsors should seek out future candidates by working with others to help them to develop experiences and skills needed to successfully apply to this program. This process may take several years. Sponsors essentially should be lifelong mentors. They should keep an eye out for potential candidates to encourage them and potentially be a sponsor for them. This can be developed during interactions at local chapter meetings, annual conferences, and the ARN members circle, as well as through a personal relationship. A sponsor should assist the applicant by reviewing how the applicant has showcased their information and how it matches the rubric. It does not solely rely on how well the sponsor personally knows the applicant. The sponsor will be confirming that the applicant possesses all of the necessary elements for successful completion of the application. It is so important to have another set of eyes to also make sure that this application is completed correctly. The sponsor should be comfortable providing coaching when it's needed. The sponsor should share ways that the potential applicant can provide a better description of their work and efforts and take credit for everything that they've done. The sponsor should understand the selection process. This includes interpretation of that applicant's information. Being familiar with the rubric is very important. The Fellowship Selection Committee needs to know from the sponsor how they know the applicant and in what capacity. This can be stated in terms of the number of years that you've worked or have shared with them. Some applicants might not have a relationship with a fellow, so you may be asked to fulfill this role for someone you have never met. The sponsor could agree to support the applicant by reviewing their CV, setting up an in-person or virtual meeting, and reviewing the application together. By then, the sponsor should have gotten to know the applicant better. If the sponsor does not have firsthand knowledge of the candidate, it is possible to acquire secondhand information by listening to their colleagues, or possibly becoming familiar with their work, or becoming knowledgeable through other people. This would be acceptable to agree to be a sponsor. Being familiar with the candidate and the work that they have done to some degree is important in the application process. Sponsors should confirm being comfortable vouching for this individual. In order to endorse the applicant, the sponsor will need to provide a succinct statement about the applicant's contribution to rehabilitation nursing. The Fellowship Selection Committee will already have the applicant's CV in the application packet. The sponsor will need to be very familiar with the list of accomplishments shown in the application. The sponsor will need to provide something more, something beyond the CV content in their sponsor statement. It needs to be something fresh. The sponsor should tell us what they think, including the applicant's contributions, what it means, and its impact on rehabilitation nursing and leadership. At the end of the sponsor statement, the sponsor is asked to affirm there is sufficient evidence supporting the applicant's qualifications and that the information is correct and meets the criteria. Lastly, the sponsor's responsibility is to guide, develop, groom, and support fellows for our future. There are lots of rehabilitation nurses who may not realize that they are qualified. The sponsor needs to encourage our members to apply. After all, we do want all members who decide to apply to be successful. The Fellowship Selection Committee really wants everyone who applies to be successful and ready to fill out the application when it's time. It truly is a designation to attain FARN. It is the most distinguished level of ARN membership, as well as the public hallmark of professional esteem. It is our hope that this video presentation will assist you in the application process. Wearing your pin, adding FARN to your title and credentials, and including it in your CV is a really big deal. On behalf of the Fellowship Selection Committee, we want to thank you so much for listening to this presentation. We hope that the information was helpful for both the applicant and the sponsor. The Fellowship Selection Committee is looking forward to receiving many applicants each year. We are excited to see growing interest in the ARN Fellowship Program. Whether you are a future applicant or sponsor, you are making a difference as a rehabilitation nursing leader. Attaining designation as a Fellow of the Association of Rehabilitation Nurses is a true badge of honor. Thank you so much again for your participation, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.